The TV was on somewhere deeper in the house, present in the way background noise always is, talking about Christmas coming up soon, about the cold settling in, which felt almost funny considering how warm his hands were from gripping the jewelry he pulled free, the weight of it satisfying in a way cash rarely was, enough to make him grin despite himself, because this one was a real hit. Something worth calling a jackpot. He moved through the house carefully when everything had already gone right. As he slipped the last of it into his bag, he caught his reflection in a darkened window, just another shape passing through a life that wasn't his, already halfway gone. That was when he noticed her. She was standing there watching him with the kind of stillness that only kids manage, not frozen out of fear, but out of curiosity, eyes following his hands rather than his face, the bag rather than what it meant. And he knew immediately she didn't understand what she was seeing, because if she had, she would have screamed or run or cried. But instead she tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. For a second, he considered knocking her out of the way, slipping past, but the thought faded just as quickly because of how calm she was, how completely unthreatened she seemed. And before he could decide how to handle it, she spoke, filling the silence with a conclusion that made sense only to her. Santa. The word caught him off guard enough that he didn't correct her right away, because correcting her would have required explaining, so instead he leaned into the misunderstanding, telling her yes in the loosest possible sense, saying he delivered things to people, which wasn't even a full lie if you squinted at it the right way. And when he told her he was in a hurry and asked her not to tell anyone, he already knew it wouldn't work. She followed him as he climbed, scrambling after him as he moved, and when he told her to stop, to stay back, she ignored it completely, insisting she wanted to see Santa in action, her voice bright and persistent in a way that made his chest tighten. This wasn't part of the plan, and plans were the only thing keeping his life from collapsing entirely. She followed him when he left the house, not hesitating for a second, falling into step like this had been decided already, talking as they walked, pointing out houses and names as if the neighborhood. And he let it happen because there was nowhere else for him to go that night where she wouldn't still be behind him. And because stopping her would have drawn more attention than letting her trail along quietly. It was during that walk that she mentioned her friend Tokun. She talked about him casually, the way kids do, as if everyone knew who he was, explaining where his house was, what it looked like, what he liked, mentioning Mona-chan in the same breath, and somewhere in the middle of her explanation, the situation shifted in his mind, turning from an inconvenience into something usable. If someone saw them, he could play the role of Santa if caught, and if anyone questioned the girl afterward, she would point to Santa instead of a person. A story that led nowhere and made it difficult for anything to ever trace back to him. He asked her about Tokun properly then, about his family, about his house, about the things that mattered to him, and she answered without hesitation, saying his favorite things were car toys and playing with his mum. Like those ideas belonged together naturally. They stopped at a convenience store along the way, the bright lights spilling out into the street, and while he waited, she pointed excitedly at a toy police car on display, insisting that Tokun wanted that one. He told her then that she should go home, not because he cared whether she stayed or left, but because it was the sensible thing to say, the kind of instruction adults gave children when they wanted the situation to end cleanly. She refused immediately, stepping closer instead of backing away, insisting she wanted to come with him, insisting she wanted to see Santa in action. And it was at that point that he made the decision, not impulsively but practically, accepting her presence as part of the plan rather than an obstacle. Inside the house itself, he moved through the living room toward the back, she whispered despite herself, excitement leaking through the cracks, until he shut it down sharply, reminding her that darkness wasn't the danger, attention was. He then worked through drawers and shelves that hadn't been touched in a while. He pulled items and few pieces of jewelry. Behind him, her voice broke the silence, telling him to hurry up to Token's room, even teasing him about the dark. They ended up there moments after that. The boy was asleep on his side. He set the toy down carefully beside him, close enough for it to be the first thing he saw when he woke up. She leaned against the edge of the bed, bending down a little, whispering to him to be happy like it was a simple request. Right after, her stomach growled softly, hunger announcing itself in the silence, cutting through the moment and pulling his focus tight. Instincts snapped back into place. She apologized immediately, shrinking in on herself, and then admitted she was hungry, which irritated him more than noise would have, because this wasn't a game, and he reminded her of that without softening it. She apologized again, quieter this time, and then said she had to go home, saying goodbye like the night had simply reached its natural end. When she was gone, the cold rushed back in, sharp and immediate, and the next morning carried the same bite, the kind that made breathing feel heavier. But what stayed with him wasn't the weather, it was how unreal the night felt in retrospect, like something that hadn't happened cleanly enough to leave behind. Later, as he passed near Token's house, under the pretense of simply moving through the neighborhood, he slowed his steps, attention sharpening as he inspected the place from a distance, quiet information gathering that came naturally to him. And that was when he saw Token inside, animated and happy, holding up the toy police car and showing it proudly to his mother, saying it was a gift from his father, his late father. And the sight landed heavier than he expected, because the boy wasn't pretending or forcing a smile. He was genuinely happy, and in that moment, he believed the night had ended cleanly, unaware that something had already settled deeper than intention, waiting. The cold was sharper than the night before, and as he moved through the streets again, it felt less like returning to a place and more like a continuation of something that hadn't fully ended. Heavy and quiet, he told himself it was finished. Whatever strange overlap had occurred between his life and hers had resolved itself, neatly enough to be forgotten, and the image of Token smiling over the toy car was proof enough that things had landed where they were supposed to. He moved on with that thought, letting it justify the lack of unease he felt. That was when he heard her again. Her voice cut through the cold, with the same unfiltered clarity it had the night before, and before he even turned to look, he already knew who it was. And when he did turn, there she was, bundled up against the weather, eyes bright, pointing excitedly at him like this reunion had been planned. Black Santa. She laughed as she said it, pointing out his nose, saying it was red and easy to spot, asking where he was going tonight, whether he had special places lined up, whether there were other friends nearby who still needed visits, and he listened in silence as she filled the space between them with questions that didn't wait for answers. She mentioned Mona-chan like it was obvious he would know her too, and before he could redirect the conversation, she had already decided the next step for him, telling him that Mona-chan lived close by, that he should go there next, that it only made sense. He asked her about Mona-chan then. Gathering information had become automatic, easier to listen than to interrupt, and she answered eagerly, explaining what Mona-chan liked, talking about her favorite stuffed animal, a striped bunny dog. This time, he told her to stay outside. No more trouble, he said, not sharply, not gently, but firmly enough that it didn't invite argument. And she nodded, accepting it without resistance, perhaps sensing that the boundary mattered more now than it had before. Inside, the work went quickly, cleaner than the night before, less improvisation required, and when he came back out, she looked up at him immediately, asking if Mona-chan was happy. He told her she had been sleeping. She nodded at that, satisfied, already imagining the rest, saying that Mona-chan would be happy when she woke up, that she wished she could see it, and the way she said it carried no jealousy, no sense of missing out, only anticipation on someone else's behalf. He reminded her then that this was a secret, and she agreed instantly, treating secrecy like a shared game rather than a burden. She asked what was next. He told her that was it for the night, explaining that the weather was going to get worse, that rain or snow would make things harder. He clarified that it would be inconvenient for the kids, reframing necessity into something she could understand. She accepted that explanation too, sadness flickering briefly across her face before she waved it away, saying goodbye easily, promising to see him tomorrow, using the words like they belonged there. Tomorrow. He didn't know why it bothered him, but it did. As he walked away, he caught himself thinking that it wasn't like him to speak in terms like that, to leave things open-ended instead of sealed shut. And the thought lingered longer than it should have, following him even as the evening grew colder and the streets emptied out. The next day, as he prepared to pass through the same street he had worked the night before, moving with the familiar habit of checking doors, windows, and gathering information, looking for police presence or anything out of place, the shouting cut through the routine. It came from nearby, sharp and careless, and when he turned, he saw her again, smaller than she had looked the night before, surrounded by familiar shapes, Tokun and Mona-chan among them, their words thrown without thought, calling her dirty, calling her smelly, telling her to stop following them, laughing in a way that never sounded like laughter to the one receiving it. He stepped in without thinking, not as Santa, not as anything else, just as himself, stopping the noise with presence alone. And when the others scattered, confused, she stayed where she was, looking up at him with the same trust she always had, asking what was wrong, asking if he was going to work again. He asked her instead why she was giving presents to kids who treated her like that, why she bothered making them happy at all. She answered simply, "Because not everyone is happy," she said, and because she wanted them to be. The answer landed heavier than it should have, because it wasn't clever or dramatic or framed to persuade. It was just true in the way children sometimes were without realizing it, and he found himself calling her an idiot oddball without any real bite behind it. He remembered then what she had said earlier about Tokun's father, about him being a police officer who died on duty, about how Tokun cried every day, and he laughed quietly, saying that giving a police car to someone like that was devilish, that it was cruel in a way only someone thoughtless could manage. She looked at him like he had misunderstood completely. She said Tokun was still proud of his dad, that he loved him, that she only wanted him to be happy, and the certainty in her voice left no room for argument. He watched her for a long moment after that, seeing something in her he hadn't expected to find, something unguarded and persistent, and he told her she was a good kid, purer than anyone had a right to be. She asked if Santa wanted anything. He said no. She told him she hoped he would find something someday, something he wanted for himself. And when he asked her name, she told him it was Fryuko, stumbling over her last name, laughing it off because it was too hard to remember. Then she said she had to go home. He noticed the bruises then, marks she hadn't tried to hide because hiding them had probably never worked. And for the first time that night, he stopped walking, stopped letting things pass, because something inside him finally resisted. He told himself he had done nothing up until now, that he was a piece of trash, but that leaving her there, pretending he hadn't seen anything, wasn't something he could stand to do. Since it was Christmas Eve, he decided he would give her the best present there was.
He did what he should have done days ago. He waited for the night to settle in, then went straight to her place. He still didn't know what he was going to do, only that he had to fix it somehow.
When he called her name again, she didn't respond right away, her breath already shallow, the cold settling in faster than she could fight it. And when she whispered that she was cold, that she wanted a warm blanket, something inside him snapped into motion. He told her he would give her as many presents as she wanted. He barely had time to register the movement before it happened. A sudden impact cracking against the side of his head, hard enough to blur the world for a second, the force coming from behind. And before the situation could harden into something worse, before the man could swing again, he moved on instinct, pulling her in close and turning away, choosing motion. The next thing the street saw was him running. He cut through the cold air with her held tight against his chest, footsteps striking pavement in uneven rhythm as blood streaked down from his head into his hair and along his face. He didn't consider where he was going,
only that staying meant letting something worse happen. His breath ragged as he carried her, exhaustion and determination blurring together until laughter bubbled up in him despite everything, a hollow sound that ended in silence. She thanked Santa. She said it was warm. And somewhere along the way, as night folded into morning, something that had been empty inside him began to fill. Slowly, quietly. He sat there longer than he needed to, watching her sleep, listening to the quiet, aware of the life he had stepped out of without formally deciding to. He thought about the hole he'd been carrying for years, the one that hadn't come from a single loss or mistake, but from accumulation, from days that never added up to anything worth keeping. He realized something had already changed, not all at once, and meeting her hadn't fixed anything yet, but it had interrupted the pattern, and sometimes that was enough to alter direction. Time passed quietly, stretched thin across seasons that came and went without ceremony, until mornings began to arrive differently, slower, heavier, worn and smooth by repetition. When she stirred, it was no longer as a child, but as someone already used to standing on her own, and he was already moving as well. Hands working through familiar motions, the rhythm of it settled into his body over the years. The place around them had changed. The air smelled of earth instead of asphalt, of fields rather than streets. And the work he did now left his hands rough in a different way, worn by soil and weather rather than broken locks and hurried nights. She spoke casually about chores, about things that needed doing, about routines that no longer felt borrowed or temporary, as if this version of life had always existed between them. When she asked him to take out the trash on his jog, already dressed for the day ahead, already moving toward a future that didn't require looking back. When he spoke about dinner later, It was almost absent-minded, and she shook her head, explaining that there was no need, that after the new employee training she would be touring the dormitory and nearby facilities, that there would be a dinner afterward. Her voice steady, confident, shaped by a life that had found its footing. Dormitory. The word landed differently now, not sharp with fear but heavy with recognition. She explained that it was close to work, that living there made sense, that it didn't cost much, and that it was what he wanted. And when she said that, the years between them compressed suddenly. He couldn't object, tried to dismiss it too quickly, insisting he would be fine, even as he understood that fine had never meant holding on forever. She smiled, untroubled. She said goodbye easily, with the ease of someone who knew where she was going, calling him Dad as she always had, the word no longer surprising, settled into place through time. When the door closed behind her, the silence that followed was full in a way only lived-in spaces could be. He stood there for a long time, old enough now to feel the weight of stillness, aware of how far he had moved from the man who once slipped through houses in the dark, how completely the city had been left behind. What he wanted no longer needed naming, because it had already been chosen through years of repetition rather than a single decision. It might not have been what she would have asked for, if she had known how to ask back then. It might not have been something the world would forgive if it bothered to look closely. What she had given him was not redemption, but continuity, handed over without condition, filling the space he hadn't known how to reach until it was already full. She found it later, his handwriting unchanged, steady and plain. He didn't explain himself. He didn't justify anything. He wrote only what he believed to be true, that he had never regretted kidnapping her, because without that moment, his life would have ended where it began. He wrote that raising her had been real, and that those days mattered. He stood before the authorities, older now, smaller than he once was, blood long gone from his hair, replaced by grey. As he was taken away, the world continued. Elsewhere, she held the letter for a moment before putting it away, acknowledging his words. Whatever he had been to the world no longer mattered there, ending his words with, "Thank you, Fuyuko, for giving me the greatest life I could have." From Black Santa.